You're telling me that ancient rust bucket is human? First speaker Zixtal's primary breathing sac deflated in what his species considered a snort. The same humans who disappeared from the galactic stage 3 centuries ago, without so much as a goodbye note? With all due respect, first speaker, Admiral Kriva adjusted her ceremonial cape with one of her secondary manipulators. That rust bucket just carved through our most advanced defensive grid, like it was made of wet paper. And yes, our scans confirm it bears human markings. Specifically, it appears to be the USS Theodore Roosevelt. The massive hologram floating in the center of the Coalition emergency chamber showed what looked like a floating city of metal and composite materials. Its hull scarred but proud, stretching nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern. Ancient missile tubes and what appeared to be primitive chemical propulsion fighter launch bays dotted its surface. By modern Coalition standards, it should have been a museum piece, if it hadn't just effortlessly disabled 17 of their most advanced warships without firing a single killing shot. Theodore Roosevelt. Zixtal tested the strange name on his speech organs. Wasn't he some sort of human tribal chief? A president, corrected Dr. Venpar, the Coalition's foremost expert on human historical archives. The elderly Arcanian's tentacles writhed with excitement as she pulled up additional data on her personal terminal. Their equivalent of a first speaker, but for a single nation-state called the United States of America. The carrier itself was part of something they called the Nimitz class, first launched in... Yes. Zixtal waved one of his primary appendages dismissively. I'm less interested in its historical significance and more concerned with why it's here, now, and how it managed to completely neutralize our most advanced defensive systems. A new voice crackled through the chamber's communication array, causing several of the gathered representatives to jump in surprise. The translation matrix took a moment to process the archaic communication protocols before rendering it in modern Coalition standard. Well, for starters, the voice was distinctly human, carrying what the matrix identified as a Texan accent. Y'all might want to update your cyber warfare suites. They're about 300 years out of date, by our reckoning. The massive carrier's hologram flickered, and suddenly a new figure appeared in the chamber. The projected avatar of a human male wearing what appeared to be an antiquated military uniform. He tipped his cap with a grin that several species present instinctively recognized as predatory. Captain Jake Miller, USS Theodore Roosevelt at your service. Sorry about the dramatic entrance, but we figured after 3 centuries, humanity needed to make a proper comeback tour. Zixtal's chromatic patches shifted to a deep purple of agitation. How dare you breach our secure channels? This is a gross violation of... Actually, Miller's avatar casually leaned against thin air. According to Article 7, subsection 12 of the original Human Coalition Accords of 2157, which, I might add, were never formally dissolved. Humanity maintains the right to direct diplomatic communication through any available means during times of potential crisis. And folks, trust me when I say we've got ourselves a situation that definitely qualifies. Dr. Venpar's tentacles were practically dancing now. The Roosevelt disappeared during the Exodus. Historical records indicate it was lost with all hands during the emergency evacuation of Earth. How? Where have you been all this time? Miller's expression sobered. That's complicated. Short version? We got caught in what you might call a temporal displacement field during the evacuation. What was 300 years for you folks was about 6 months for us. We've spent the last week just trying to wrap our heads around how much everything's changed. He paused, then added with a wry smile. Though I gotta say, some things haven't changed nearly as much as they should have. What's that supposed to mean? Admiral Kriva demanded, her warrior's instincts picking up on the subtle threat beneath the casual demeanor. Well, ma'am, for starters, we couldn't help but notice that the Coalition's been getting mighty cozy with some folks calling themselves the Harmonious Collective. Ring any bells? The chamber erupted in murmurs. The Harmonious Collective had emerged as a major political force in the past decade, promising technological advancement and cultural unity. They'd already absorbed several smaller civilizations through what they called peaceful integration. The Collective is a legitimate political entity, Zixtal stated firmly. Their contributions to Coalition society have been... They're the Harvesters, Miller cut in, his casual demeanor evaporating. Same bunch that tried to strip mine Earth 3 centuries ago, just operating under a new name. And based on the data we've gathered since arriving, they're about 6 months away from launching a full-scale invasion of Coalition space. Stunned silence fell over the chamber. The Harvesters were considered little more than a historical footnote now. a mysterious species that had attempted to invade Earth, only to be driven back by humanity's unexpectedly fierce resistance. Their defeat had been one of the factors that led to humanity's acceptance into the greater galactic community. That's an outrageous claim, Zixtal sputtered. The collective has shown no signs of... With respect, first speaker. Miller's avatar walked to the center of the chamber, and suddenly the holographic space was filled with streams of data, communication intercepts, energy signatures, resource allocation patterns. We've had about 6 months of relative time to upgrade our systems and analyze current events. The patterns are identical to what we saw before Earth. They're using the same playbook, just with better PR. Admiral Kriva's tactical mind was already processing the information, her species' natural skepticism warring with the evidence before her. Even if what you say is true, one ancient carrier, however, surprisingly capable, cannot hope to stand against a full-scale invasion. Miller's grin returned, and this time there was nothing casual about it. Who said anything about just one carrier? The chamber's holographic display suddenly expanded, showing spatial readings from across Coalition space. Dozens of signals were appearing, each bearing human IFF signatures. The Roosevelt had not returned alone. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentients. Miller's avatar spread his arms wide. Allow me to reintroduce you to the United States Navy, Pacific Fleet. We've spent our subjective time making some improvements to our ships, and we've got 3 centuries of missed fights to make up for. Dr. Venpar's tentacles had gone completely still. The entire Pacific Fleet. It didn't just disappear during the Exodus. You planned this. Somehow, you planned this. Let's just say humanity learned some hard lessons about keeping all our eggs in one basket. Miller nodded. When the evacuation order came down, certain elements of Earth's military forces were given alternative instructions. The temporal displacement wasn't an accident. It was a backup plan. A backup plan for what? Zixtal demanded, though the growing dread in his voice suggested he already knew the answer. For exactly what's happening now. The Harvesters weren't going to give up just because we bloodied their nose once. We knew they'd be back, maybe in a century, maybe in a millennium. So we left behind an insurance policy, a fleet in temporal stasis, ready to emerge when the threat returned. Miller's avatar began to fade. We've transmitted all our evidence to your secure networks. The real secure networks, not the compromised ones the collective helped you set up. I suggest you review it quickly. The Harvesters are moving up their timetable now that we've shown our hand. Wait! Admiral Kriva called out. Why? Why reveal yourselves like this? Why not simply strike at the collective directly? Miller's image solidified again briefly. Because contrary to what the history books might say, humanity didn't just fight for ourselves. We fought for everyone the Harvesters would have victimized after us. The Coalition might have forgotten that, but we didn't. We're giving you the chance to stand with us, same as we stood with you 3 centuries ago. His smile turned slightly sharp. Though I should mention, we're going to proceed either way. We'd just prefer to do it as allies. The avatar vanished, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. After several moments, Dr. Venpar spoke softly, her academic's curiosity overtaken by something closer to awe. You know what I find most remarkable? They named that carrier after Theodore Roosevelt, a human leader famous for saying, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." And here they are, 3 centuries later, doing exactly that. Admiral Kriva's martial mind was already shifting to a war footing, running scenarios and contingencies. First speaker, given the evidence presented and the potential threat level, I recommend we... She was cut off by new alarms. The chamber's displays lit up with emergency broadcasts from across Coalition space. The Harmonious Collective had just launched simultaneous attacks on 17 Coalition worlds. Right on cue, human carriers were appearing in system after system. Their ancient frames housing technology that had been upgraded and refined in temporal isolation for what was, to them, 6 months of intensive preparation. Well, Zixtal's chromatic patches shifted to the deep red of resignation and determination. It seems humanity's timing remains impeccable, even after 3 centuries. He raised his primary appendages in the traditional gesture of official proclamation. Let the records show that the Coalition hereby formally reactivates all prior military agreements with humanity, effective immediately. As if in response, the Theodore Roosevelt's massive form appeared again in the holographic display. Its ancient hull seemed to shimmer, quantum phase armor coming online as squadrons of fighters, far more advanced than their supposedly primitive launch bays would suggest, began to deploy. The ship's original motto became visible along its hull, the letters gleaming, "In harm's way." Humanity, it seemed, had a flair for dramatic returns, and the Harvesters were about to be reminded why they'd failed to take Earth in the first place. Across Coalition space, other human carriers were emerging from temporal stasis, their crews made up of men and women who, from their perspective, had just left an Earth in crisis 6 months ago. They carried with them not just the determination to protect their own species, but the accumulated knowledge and technological advancement of 3 centuries of preparation, compressed into half a year of relative time. The Harvesters had spent 300 years evolving their tactics, slowly infiltrating the Coalition through subtle manipulation and political maneuvering. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humanity's disappearance meant humanity had forgotten. They were about to learn otherwise. As the Theodore Roosevelt's first squadrons engaged Harvester forces over the Coalition capital world, Captain Miller's voice echoed through both Coalition and enemy communications channels, carrying a message that would soon become famous throughout known space. "Attention Harvester forces. This is humanity, checking in from our 300-year coffee break. We notice you're still up to your old tricks. Well, we brought some new ones of our own. Let's see how yours hold up." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries to come. But perhaps more importantly, it would be remembered as the day the galaxy learned that humanity hadn't abandoned its allies. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. And return they had, with all the dramatic timing and overwhelming force that had made humanity famous in the first place. In the end, that was humanity's greatest weapon. Not their technology, not their tactical brilliance, but their absolute commitment to finishing what they started, even if it took 3 centuries to do it. The Harvesters never stood a chance. They just didn't know it yet. You know what I find really ironic? Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez's holographic avatar materialized next to Miller's in the Coalition emergency chamber, her flight suit bearing the markings of the Roosevelt's elite Ghost Rider squadron. 300 years ago, we were rushing to evacuate Earth because we thought we weren't ready for a full-scale war with the Harvesters. Turns out getting stuck in temporal stasis was probably the best thing that could have happened to us. The chamber, now transformed into a makeshift war room, was alive with tactical displays showing battle updates from across Coalition space. Admiral Vkr'lak, who had quickly proven herself one of the few Coalition military leaders able to adapt to humanity's unorthodox tactics, studied the data with her 4 eyes narrowed in concentration. "Your point being, Lieutenant?" "Well," Rodriguez gestured at a particular tactical display showing a Harvester dreadnought being systematically dismantled by what appeared to be Civil War-era ironclad ships. "We had time to think, to plan, to really get creative. Did you know we spent 2 whole months of our subjective time just brainstorming the most ridiculous weapon concepts we could think of? Turns out when you combine 300 years of theoretical physics advancement with sleep-deprived sailors' crazy ideas, you get that." The display showed one of the ironclads opening what looked like a combination of a Tesla coil and a banjo, creating a quantum resonance field that was literally unraveling the dreadnought's atomic structure. "You weaponized musical instruments," Dr. Venpar observed, her tentacles twitching between academic fascination and mild horror. "Among other things," Miller chuckled. "The USS Monitor over there is running on an engine that technically exists in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. The math alone gave half our engineering crew migraines. But hey, unlimited power generation is worth a few headaches." First speaker Zixtal, who had been unusually quiet since the fighting began, finally spoke up. "I'm beginning to understand why the historical records of humanity's first encounter with the Harvesters were so inconsistent. Your species appears to operate on a level of controlled chaos that defies conventional military doctrine." "Oh, you haven't seen anything yet," Rodriguez grinned. "Wait until the carriers from the Atlantic Fleet show up. Those guys spent their subjective time binge-watching old sci-fi movies for inspiration. Pretty sure the Enterprise is running an weapons system based on something called the Force." The chamber's main display suddenly shifted to show a new battle unfolding in the Proxima sector. The USS Nimitz had just emerged from temporal stasis, but instead of launching fighters, it appeared to be broadcasting cat videos on all frequencies? "Ah," Miller nodded approvingly. "Mimetic Warfare Package Alpha. Turns out the Harvester's hive mind structure has a really hard time processing certain types of human cultural content. Who knew 3 centuries of accumulated cat videos could be weaponized?" Admiral Vkr'lak's tactical mind was visibly struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with everything she knew about warfare. "You're telling me you're fighting an advanced alien species with Ancient Earth entertainment? Among other things, Rodriguez shrugged. The thing about being stuck in temporal stasis is that you have a lot of time to think outside the box. Way outside the box. Sometimes we forgot where we left the box entirely. But it works. The display showed the Harvester fleet in the Proxima sector falling into disarray as their neural networks were overwhelmed by what appeared to be a combination of cat videos, quantum physics, and what the translation matrix identified as dad jokes. "This is absurd," Zixtal muttered, but there was a note of admiration in his voice. "Brilliantly, effectively absurd. That's humanity for you." Miller's avatar spread his hands. "We spent 6 months subjective time knowing we'd eventually have to fight an enemy with 300 years of technological advancement. So we decided to advance sideways instead of forward. Why try to beat them at their own game when you can make them play yours?" The chamber's displays continued to update, showing battle after battle where human forces were employing tactics and technologies that seemed to operate on their own unique logic. A squadron of F-35s that had been upgraded to phase through solid matter while playing Wagner. A destroyer using what appeared to be a weaponized version of Murphy's Law. A submarine that was somehow deploying its weapons through time itself. "I have a question." Dr. Venpar raised one of her tentacles. "If you had access to all this theoretical knowledge from 300 years of advancement, why use it to upgrade ancient military hardware? Why not simply build new ships?" Miller and Rodriguez exchanged knowing looks. "2 reasons," Miller explained. "First, there's something to be said for working with what you know. These ships, these planes, they're not just platforms, they're home. We know every rivet, every corridor, every quirk. Easier to upgrade something you know inside and out than start from scratch." "And the second reason?" Admiral Kriva prompted. Rodriguez's grin turned predatory. "Style points. Come on, what's more intimidating? Getting beaten by some fancy new supership or getting your fleet taken apart by what looks like a museum piece? The psychological warfare aspect alone is worth it." As if to emphasize her point, the main display showed a Harvester command ship attempting to surrender to what appeared to be a Baoku-era PT boat that was currently existing in 5 different quantum states simultaneously. "Besides," Miller added, "I think the universe needed a reminder that humanity never actually lost our touch. We just took a little break to come up with some new material." The chamber's attention was drawn to a new alert. The Harvester forces were attempting to regroup for a major counteroffensive. In response, dozens of human vessels were emerging from temporal stasis in a carefully choreographed sequence that, when viewed from above, formed a giant smiley face. "Really?" Zixtal's chromatic patches shifted to a color that indicated both exasperation and amusement. "Hey," Rodriguez defended, "if you're going to save the galaxy, you might as well have fun doing it." As the next phase of the battle began, Miller's avatar turned to address the coalition leaders with an expression of mock severity. "Now, who's ready to see what happens when you give a bunch of sailors 300 years of physics textbooks and 6 months of isolation to get creative?" The answer, as the Harvesters were rapidly discovering, was something that would be talked about in galactic civilization for millennia to come. Humanity hadn't just returned. They'd returned with style, creativity, and a reminder that sometimes the best way to win a war isn't to match your enemy's advancement, but to rewrite the rules of advancement entirely. And they were just getting started. "Incoming transmission from the Harvester command ship," announced the Theodore Roosevelt's AI, its voice carrying what could only be described as digital amusement. "They're demanding to speak with our leadership." Their exact words were, "We wish to understand what manner of madness we are facing." Captain Miller's actual physical form, not his avatar, sat in his command chair aboard the Roosevelt, drinking what might have been his 1,000th cup of coffee since emerging from temporal stasis. "Put them through. But first, Rodriguez, how's that special project coming along?" Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through with a distinct note of glee. "Operation Welcome to the Internet is ready to deploy, sir. We've compressed 3 centuries of human memes into a quantum data package, the minute they open a direct communication channel." "Perfect." Miller straightened his uniform and nodded to the AI. "Let's show them what 300 years of human creativity looks like in weaponized form." The main screen flickered to life, revealing what appeared to be a crystalline entity surrounded by floating data streams, the current form of the Harvester leadership cast. Its voice came through as a series of harmonics that the ship's translators rendered into Coalition standard. "Human vessel, your tactics defy all known parameters of warfare. We demand—" "Oh, hey!" Miller interrupted cheerfully. "Before we get to the demands part, have you heard about this thing called Rickrolling?" Rodriguez hit the button. "Across Harvester space, every connected system, Every neural network, every quantum-enhanced processing node was suddenly flooded with 300 years' worth of human internet culture, compressed into a weaponized data stream that their hive mind couldn't help but try to process. The results were spectacular. Their flagship is playing Nyan Cat on all external displays. Dr. Venpar reported from her station in the Coalition emergency chamber, her tentacles writhing in what might have been either horror or delight. And are those harvester destroyers doing something called the Macarena? Admiral Kriva studied the tactical displays with professional interest. Their entire command and control structure appears to be breaking down. Half their fleet is now engaged in something called a dance-off, and the other half seems to be arguing about whether some dress is blue or gold. The thing about a hive mind, Miller explained, leaning back in his chair with evident satisfaction, is that it's really good at processing uniform, structured data. But throw in about 3 centuries worth of human nonsense all at once? It's like trying to drink from a fire hose of pure chaos. The harvester leader's crystalline form was flickering erratically. What? What is a keyboard cat? Why are there so many variations of Doge? These concepts, they make no sense. They reference themselves in infinite loops of meaning and meaninglessness. Welcome to human culture, Rodriguez grinned. 300 years of it, all at once. How's that processing power holding up? Through the quantum communication channels, they could actually see the harvester hive mind trying to categorize and understand everything from early 21st century rage comics to the great AI-generated meme wars of 2167. Their attempts to impose order on the chaos of human creativity were like watching someone try to alphabetize a hurricane. But this is not how war is conducted. The harvester leader's voice had taken on a note of desperation. There are protocols, standards. You cannot defeat an advanced civilization with cat videos and recursive jokes. Actually, Miller held up a finger. That's where you're wrong. See, while you spent 300 years advancing in a straight line, we had time to think about advancement differently. You evolved your technology, we evolved our creativity. And guess which one's harder to defend against? First speaker Zixtal, who had been watching the proceedings with increasing amazement, finally spoke up. I believe I understand now. When humanity disappeared, we assumed you had fled in fear. But you weren't running away. We were running forward. Miller nodded. Just not in the direction anyone expected. Speaking of which, Rodriguez, shall we show them what happens when you combine quantum mechanics with what humans call dad jokes? Oh God. The harvester leader's crystalline form actually shuddered. There's more? So much more. Rodriguez's voice carried the same tone someone might use when offering cookies to children. Hey, want to see what happens when we weaponize puns? The battle, if it could still be called that, continued across Coalition space. Harvester ships found their quantum computers locked in endless loops trying to determine who was on first base. Their neural networks crashed trying to process the philosophical implications of Doge memes. Their most advanced AI systems became hopelessly entangled in trying to understand why humans had spent so much time arguing about whether hot dogs were sandwiches. And through it all, humanity's ancient warships, upgraded with technology that operated on the very edge of insanity, continued their advance. The USS Enterprise was now firing photon torpedoes that somehow contained compressed episodes of cat videos. The USS Nimitz had deployed a squadron of fighters that attacked in formation patterns based on popular dance moves. And the Theodore Roosevelt itself had just launched what appeared to be a virus that forced all harvester systems to communicate exclusively in LOLCat. This isn't warfare, the harvester leader protested weakly, its crystalline form now displaying what appeared to be an endless loop of never gonna give you up. You're right, Miller agreed cheerfully. This is humanity saying hello again. Wave hello to the nice hive mind, everyone. The combined human fleet, now arranged in a formation that somehow spelled out Tsu, when viewed from above, responded with a synchronized broadcast of every version of All Your Base Are Belong to Us, created in the last 3 centuries. The harvester hive mind crashed completely. In the silence that followed, Dr. Venpar turned to Admiral Kriva with an expression of academic wonder. Should I update the historical records to indicate that humanity defeated one of the most advanced civilizations in known space with memes? Technically, Rodriguez chimed in. We defeated them with weaponized creativity. The memes were just the delivery system. As Coalition forces moved in to secure the now confused and disorganized harvester fleet, Miller's voice carried across all channels with what would become one of the most quoted statements in galactic history. And that, folks, is why you don't give a bunch of bored humans 300 years of scientific advancement and 6 months to think about how to use it creatively. We tend to get a little experimental. The galaxy would never look at human culture quite the same way again. And somewhere in the quantum data streams, a very confused harvester AI was still trying to figure out why humans thought this is fine, while everything was clearly on fire. 1 month later, Coalition Emergency Chamber, Victory Celebration. I still can't believe you rickrolled an entire hostile civilization into submission. First speaker Zixtal mused, his chromatic patches shifting through colors of amusement and disbelief. The celebration around them was in full swing, with representatives from across Coalition space mingling with human crews. To be fair, Captain Miller replied, adjusting his now slightly less pristine uniform. That was just the coup de grace. The real victory was proving that sometimes the best way to advance isn't in a straight line. Dr. Venpar floated nearby, her tentacles now adorned with what appeared to be a USS Theodore Roosevelt commemorative pin. The academic community is still trying to understand how you managed to weaponize Murphy's Law. The mathematical proofs alone are causing existential crises among our theoretical physicists. Oh, that was Tom from engineering. Lieutenant Rodriguez chimed in, materializing her avatar next to them with a champagne glass in hand. He spent 3 weeks of our subjective time trying to figure out why his coffee maker always broke at the worst possible moment. Ended up discovering you could actually quantify and weaponize universal irony. And the quantum entangled banjo? Admiral Kriva asked, her 4 eyes twinkling with barely suppressed mirth. Would you believe that started as a bet? Miller chuckled. Someone said, I bet you can't make a musical instrument that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Challenge accepted. The chamber's main display was showing footage from across Coalition space, former harvester ships being retrofitted, their neural networks now permanently addled by exposure to concentrated human culture, many of them still occasionally broadcasting random memes into space. A group of Coalition scientists was carefully studying a decommissioned quantum banjo, while nearby, a team of human engineers was explaining to a fascinated audience why they'd decided to power their ships with weaponized improbability. You know what the really funny part is? Rodriguez mused, watching the scenes unfold. We spent so much time worrying about matching their technological advancement, when all we really needed was to remember that humanity's greatest strength was never our technology. It was our ability to think sideways when everyone else was thinking forward. Speaking of thinking sideways, Dr. Venpar interjected, my research team finally decoded those strange energy signatures we detected during the final battle. Were you actually using synchronized dad jokes to generate quantum field disruptions? Ah, that was Captain Reynolds on the Enterprise. Miller nodded sagely. Turns out if you tell exactly the right dad joke at exactly the right moment while quantum systems are aligned, you can actually cause localized reality hiccups, something about the groan-inducing factor creating ripples in the space-time continuum. The most remarkable thing, Admiral Kriva observed, is that none of this technology actually violates any known laws of physics. You just interpreted them very, very creatively. Well, when you have 6 months of subjective time to read 300 years worth of physics papers, Miller spread his hands. Let's just say we had some unique perspectives on application versus theory. The celebration was interrupted by a sudden alert, but not an alarming one. Across the chamber's displays, they could see the first of the converted harvester ships preparing for its maiden voyage under Coalition command. Its neural networks, once dedicated to conquest, had been reprogrammed with what the human engineers called a healthy appreciation for the absurd. You know, Zixtal mused, watching the ship power up with systems that somehow combined harvester quantum technology with human meme culture. When the historical records speak of this victory, I'm not sure anyone will believe how it actually happened. Oh, that reminds me, Rodriguez grinned. Wait until you see what we did with the historical records department. Turns out you can actually encode tactical data in cat videos. We've got 3 centuries of military history hidden in what looks like cute pet compilations. Dr. Venpar's tentacles went completely still. You're joking. Are we? Miller raised an eyebrow. Are we really, after everything you've seen us do? The gathered Coalition leaders looked at each other, then at the displays showing ships powered by weaponized improbability and quantum-entangled musical instruments. and collectively decided that when it came to humanity, assuming anything was a joke might be the biggest joke of all. To the future, Miller raised his glass. And to remembering that sometimes the best way to solve a problem isn't to overpower it or outthink it, but to make it laugh so hard it forgets why it was a problem in the first place. Across coalition space, ships that had once been part of the most feared fleet in the galaxy were now broadcasting an endless stream of cat videos into the void, each one containing encrypted tactical data that only humanity knew how to read. The greatest military victory in recent galactic history had been achieved not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through the weaponization of creativity itself. And as the celebration continued, somewhere in the vast digital networks that connected coalition space, a former Harvester AI was finally beginning to understand the cosmic humor of a ship powered by dad jokes. It had taken 300 years, but humanity had finally proven that in the end, the best defense against advancement wasn't to match it, it was to make it laugh. The galaxy would never be quite the same. And that, as humanity would say, was exactly the point. The end.